They smiled while stabbing me in the back. My own brother and his wife spent months planning to steal my son from inside my own home. What they didn't expect was how far I would go to get him back. This is my story. The phone call that stole my son. I was standing in the middle of my lavender field when the phone rang. The late afternoon sun was warm on my shoulders, and the air smelled like purple heaven. Thousands of lavender stalks swayed gently around me, their soft scent wrapping around my skin the way it always did when I needed peace. Quill Haven had never looked more beautiful. My cottage resort, the one I built with my own hands after my divorce, was finally breathing again. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pull it out. "Ms. Quill?" The voice on the other end was cold, professional, and completely unfamiliar. "This is Attorney Lang from Family Court. I'm calling to inform you that your brother, Cassian Hartwell, and his wife, Sable, have filed an emergency petition for full custody of your son, Kai." The world stopped. My knees didn't buckle. Not right away, but my fingers tightened so hard around the phone that the edges dug into my palm. The lavender blurred in front of me. I could hear my own heartbeat slamming in my ears. "Excuse me?" My voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. "What did you just say?" "They're claiming you're not fit to be Kai's mother. They've already submitted documentation. A hearing has been scheduled for next week. Not fit to be his mother." The words hit me like ice water poured straight into my chest. I stood there, frozen between rows of blooming lavender, the same field where Kai and I had run barefoot just 2 days ago, laughing until our stomachs hurt. Now those same flowers felt like they were closing in. I tried to speak, but nothing came out at first. My throat had closed up completely. "Miss Quill, are you still there?" Yes, I finally managed. "I'm here." My mind was spinning. Cassian. My own brother. The same man I had welcomed into my home 6 months ago when his business in Denver collapsed. The same man I let sleep in my guest house, eat at my table, and watch my son every single evening while I worked late to keep Quill Haven alive. I had trusted him. I had trusted both of them, Cassian and Sable, and now they were trying to take my 8-year-old son away from me. I don't remember ending the call. One moment I was listening to the lawyer's calm, detached voice. The next moment, the phone was hanging loosely in my hand, and the lavender field was spinning slowly around me. Kai, my sweet, quiet boy with the messy brown hair and the gap-toothed smile. The boy who still crawled into my bed during thunderstorms. The boy I had raised alone for the last 4 years after his father walked out. They wanted to take him. The thought sent a wave of pure terror through me so strong that I had to reach out and grab the wooden fence post to keep from falling. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my heart with both hands. How could they do this? How could my own brother look at me, the sister who had given him a place to stay when no one else would, and decide that I wasn't good enough to raise my own child? I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. The lavender scent was still there, soft and calming, but it couldn't touch the storm raging inside me. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about my son. And in that moment, standing alone in the purple field I had poured my entire heart into, I realized something cold and terrifying. My kindness had opened the door, and my own brother had walked through it with a knife behind his back. If you've ever trusted family with your whole heart, only to watch them try to destroy the most precious thing in your life, then stay with me. Because this is the story of how I lost my son, and what I had to become to get him back. The poison they spread. The lavender still smelled the same the next morning, but everything else had changed. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that lawyer's voice repeating the same cold sentence. "They're claiming you're not fit to be Kai's mother." By sunrise, I was already walking the gravel paths of Quill Haven, checking on the cottages even though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Cassian was my brother. Blood. He had watched me cry the night my marriage ended. He had held Kai when he was just a newborn. Surely this was some terrible mistake. Then the first guest cancellation came. A nice couple from Boulder who had booked the Rose Cottage for their anniversary sent a short email. They were regretfully canceling due to personal reasons. No explanation. just gone. By midday, 2 more cancellations appeared, then 3. I stood behind the reception desk staring at the computer screen when Ellis Rowan walked in. My most trusted manager. She had been with me since the very first year I reopened Quill Haven. Her face was tight with worry. "Zephyrine, people are talking," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "In town, at the market, even at the coffee shop on Maple Street." I looked up slowly. "Talking about what?" Ellis hesitated. She didn't want to hurt me. I could see it in her eyes. "They're saying you're never home, that you leave Kai alone too much while you work, that after the divorce, you've been struggling, emotionally." She swallowed. "Some are saying you're unstable." Unstable. The word landed like a stone in still water. I felt my stomach twist, because I knew exactly where those words were coming from. Cassian and Sable had been living in the small guest house behind the main building for 6 months. They saw everything. They knew my schedule. They knew the nights I stayed up late doing paperwork. They knew the mornings I drove Kai to school with tired eyes. And now they were using it all against me. That evening, I finally confronted them. I found Cassian and Sable sitting on the back porch of the guest house, drinking iced tea like nothing was wrong. Kai was inside playing with his toy trucks. I could hear him making engine noises through the open window. "Why?" My voice cracked before I could stop it. "Why are you doing this?" Cassian looked up, his face calm. Too calm. "We're just worried about Kai, Zephyrine. You work all the time. He needs stability. A real family." Sable didn't even look ashamed. She just nodded gently like she was doing me a favor. "We've been watching how hard it's been for you since the divorce. We only want what's best for him." I stood there, staring at my own brother, and felt something inside me break. This wasn't worry. This was poison. They weren't just spreading rumors in town. They were calling my regular guests. They were whispering to the parents at Kai's school. They were even reaching out to our relatives. Aunt Seraphine called me the next afternoon. Her voice was full of concern, but I could hear the doubt underneath. "Sweetheart, Cassian told us you've been under a lot of pressure. He says Kai has been asking why Mommy is always so tired. Is that true?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, watching Kai draw pictures at the table, completely unaware that his uncle and aunt were trying to steal him away. The fear was constant now. It lived in my chest like a second heartbeat. Every time Kai laughed, I felt terror, because what if this was one of the last times I heard that sound in my own home? I started noticing small things, how Cassian would casually ask Kai questions about our daily routine, how Sable would take photos when I came home late from fixing a leaky roof on one of the cottages, how they smiled at me during dinner, but their eyes stayed cold. They were building a case, and they were doing it from inside my own house. Every night after Kai fell asleep, I sat alone on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. The same wall where I had hung his little handprints when he was 4. My hands would shake as I replayed every kind thing I had done for Cassian since he showed up broken and broke at my door. I had given him shelter. I had given him time. I had given him trust. And in return, he was trying to take my son. The worst part wasn't even the lies. It was realizing that my own brother didn't just want my house or my business. He wanted my life. He wanted to step into my place and raise Kai as his own, so he could finally have the stable family he had failed to build in Denver. That truth settled over me like heavy winter fog, slow, cold, suffocating. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the heartbreak, something else began to stir. A quiet, burning anger. If you've ever felt the slow poison of someone you love turning your own life against you, then you know exactly how helpless it feels. But helplessness doesn't last forever, because the more they spread their lies, the more I started to see the truth hiding behind their smiles. And soon, I wouldn't be the only one watching. When the court took him away, the courtroom smelled like old wood and desperation. I sat on the hard wooden bench, my hands folded so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had gone white. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a cold, unforgiving glow over everything. My heart was beating so loudly I was sure the judge could hear it. Cassian and Sable sat across the aisle, looking calm and put together. like responsible adults, like the kind of people who deserved to raise a child. I couldn't stop staring at them. How could the same man who once carried me on his shoulders when I was little now sit there and try to rip my world apart? The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, reviewed the documents in front of her. Every page felt like another nail being driven into my chest. I wanted to stand up and scream that none of it was true, but I stayed silent, frozen, the way people do when their worst nightmare is unfolding right in front of them. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said slowly, her voice steady and final, the court finds it in the best interest of the child to grant temporary custody to Mr. Cassian Hartwell and Mrs. Sable Hartwell. The room tilted. I heard the words, but they didn't feel real. Temporary custody. To them. Kai, who had been sitting quietly beside me until that moment, suddenly understood. His small hand grabbed mine. "Mommy?" His voice was small and scared. "Do I have to go with Uncle Cassian?" Before I could answer, the bailiff moved toward us. Kai started crying. Not the soft kind of tears, the deep, broken kind that tore straight out of his chest. "No, I want to stay with Mommy," he sobbed, clinging to my arm with all his 8-year-old strength. "Please, don't make me go. Mommy, don't let them take me." I wrapped my arms around him, pulling him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo and the faint lavender that always clung to his clothes from playing in the fields. My tears fell into his hair. "Shh, baby. It's okay," I whispered, even though nothing was okay. My voice shook so badly I could barely get the words out. "Mommy's going to fix this, I promise." But they still took him. I watched as Cassian gently pried Kai's fingers from my shirt. I watched my son reach back for me, his face red and wet with tears, screaming my name. I watched Sable put a hand on Kai's shoulder like she was already his mother, and then they were gone. The courtroom doors closed behind them with a soft, final click that echoed in my bones. I sat there long after everyone else had left. The judge, the lawyers, even the bailiff, all gone. Just me and the empty bench where my son had been sitting only minutes ago. Something inside me shattered that day. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was quiet, like the slow breaking of glass under pressure. I drove home alone. Quill Haven looked the same when I pulled up the long gravel drive. The lavender fields stretched out on both sides, purple and peaceful under the late afternoon sun, but the silence felt different now, heavier. I walked through the big house, touching the things Kai had left behind. His favorite red truck on the living room rug, the drawing of us holding hands under a giant lavender bush taped to the refrigerator, his small pair of boots still muddy by the back door. I sank to the floor in his bedroom and cried until my throat burned and my eyes swelled shut. Why? That question wouldn't leave me alone. Why would my own brother do this to me? To Kai? I had given Cassian everything when he showed up broken from Denver. A roof, food, time with my son, a chance to start over. And this was how he repaid me. The days that followed blurred together in a fog of pain. I closed the main dining hall at Quill Haven, told Ellis Rowan to cancel all new bookings for the next 2 weeks. I couldn't smile for guests. I couldn't pretend everything was fine when my chest felt like it had been hollowed out. I barely left the house. Marigold Tate was the only one who refused to let me disappear completely. She showed up every evening with soup or fresh bread, sitting with me on the porch swing as the sun went down behind the mountains. She didn't try to fix me with words. She just sat there, holding my hand when the tears came again, letting me talk about Kai until my voice gave out. "Zephyrine," she said softly one night, her voice thick with shared sorrow. "This isn't the end. You're his mother. That bond doesn't break just because a piece of paper says so." But in that moment, it felt like it had. Every night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Kai's cries in my head. Every morning, I woke up reaching for him only to remember the other side of the bed was empty and cold. I had lost almost everything. My son, my reputation in town, a growing number of loyal guests who no longer trusted me, and the last fragile piece of faith I had in family. The pain was so deep it felt physical, like a bruise that covered my entire heart. Yet somewhere beneath the crushing weight of despair, a tiny spark refused to die, a question that kept whispering in the dark. What if I could prove them wrong? What if the truth was still out there, waiting for me to find it? Because if Cassian and Sable thought they had won, they had no idea what a mother was capable of when her child was taken from her arms. The hidden truth I uncovered. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake in the big empty house, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, replaying Kai's cries from the courtroom over and over again. The sound never faded. It lived inside my chest like a wound that refused to close. One particularly dark evening, after another day of silence and grief, I picked up the phone and called the only person I still trusted with my pain. Vesper Lang answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm, professional, but carried a quiet strength that made me sit up straighter. "Zephyrine, I've been waiting for your call. Tell me what you need." That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I stopped hiding. I stopped drifting through the house like a ghost. Instead, I started digging, quietly, carefully, the way a mother does when her child's future is on the line. Vesper met me in her small office downtown, surrounded by stacks of legal files and soft lamplight. She listened without interrupting as I poured out every fear, every doubt, every fragment of memory. Then she leaned forward and said the words that gave me my first real breath of hope in weeks. "We're going to find the truth, and we're going to use it." We began slowly. Vesper helped me request phone records, financial statements, and copies of every document Cassian and Sable had submitted to the court. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but then the pieces started appearing, small cracks in their perfect story. One afternoon, while reviewing old security footage from the guest house, I saw it. Cassian sitting at the kitchen table with Kai on his lap, asking gentle questions in that warm uncle voice I used to trust. "So tell me again, buddy, what time does Mommy usually get home when she's working late?" Kai, innocent and trusting, answered every question without hesitation. My stomach turned. They hadn't just been watching me. They had been using my own son to gather information, turning his love for his uncle into ammunition against me. The recordings were worse. Vesper played one for me in her office. It was a conversation between Cassian and me from months ago, but the version they submitted to the court had been carefully edited. My tired sighs had been cut and rearranged. My frustrated comment about a difficult guest had been twisted to sound like I resented being a mother. The raw, unedited file told a completely different story. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling a cold fury rise in my veins. "They didn't just lie about me," I whispered. "They built an entire case on pieces of my life they stole and reshaped." Vesper nodded, her expression grave. "And there's more." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed text messages from Cousin Lark and Cousin Ridge, the two relatives who had initially sided with Cassian. They had started to doubt his story after seeing how quickly he moved to take over my home. In the messages, Cassian had bragged to them months earlier about his plan. "How long before I can get the boy and the property?" he had written in one. "Zephyrines too soft. She'll break eventually." Another message showed him discussing hiring a private investigator to follow my daily routine and document every time I left Kai with a babysitter or worked late. I read the words once, then again. My hands began to tremble. This wasn't a desperate attempt by a struggling brother. This was calculated. Cassian had been planning to take Kai and my home long before he ever moved in. He had smiled at my dinner table, played with my son, and accepted my help, all while sharpening the knife. The despair that had lived in me for weeks slowly transformed into something sharper, colder, a quiet, burning rage, not the loud kind that screams and breaks things. This was deeper. It settled in my bones and gave me clarity I hadn't felt since the phone call in the lavender field. I wasn't just fighting for my son anymore. I was fighting to expose the man who had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible, by pretending to love the family he was trying to destroy. For the first time since Kai was taken, I felt something other than broken. I felt determined. Vesper watched me carefully as I closed the folder. "This changes everything, Zephyrine. We have enough to file for an emergency rehearing, but you need to be ready. This won't be gentle." I looked up at her, my voice low but steady. "I don't want gentle anymore." Outside her office window, the Colorado sky was turning the deep blue of early evening. Somewhere in this town, my little boy was living in a house that should have been mine, calling people who didn't deserve to be called family. I thought of Kai's laugh, his small hand in mine, the way he used to fall asleep against my shoulder after long days in the lavender fields. That memory didn't break me this time. It fueled me, because the truth was finally surfacing from the shadows where Cassian had tried to bury it, and I was no longer willing to stay silent while my brother rewrote our story. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved and trusted completely, then you know the moment when pain turns into purpose. That moment had arrived for me, and I was ready to walk straight into the fire. The reckoning and the return. The courtroom felt smaller this time. Not because the room had changed, but because I was no longer the broken woman who had sat here weeks ago. I walked in with Vesper Lang at my side, carrying a thick folder of truth that could no longer be hidden or twisted. Judge Ravencrest sat at the bench, her face unreadable. The same fluorescent lights hummed overhead. But today, the air felt different, charged, like the moment before a storm finally breaks. Cassian and Sable were already seated. They looked confident at first, until Detective Solene Crow took the stand. Her voice was steady and professional as she described the inconsistencies she had found in the evidence Cassian submitted. Edited recordings, inaccurate timelines, private investigator reports that crossed legal lines. With every calm sentence she spoke, I watched my brother's face grow paler. Marigold Tate spoke next. My dearest friend didn't raise her voice, but her words carried the weight of years of watching me build Quill Haven from nothing. "I have known Zephyrine for over a decade," she said quietly. "She is the most devoted mother I have ever seen. What Cassian and Sable did was not protection, it was manipulation." Ellis Rowan followed. My loyal manager stood tall and spoke clearly about the sudden drop in business, the strange phone calls from guests, and how Cassian had tried to influence staff members behind my back. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting in my lap. Inside, my heart was racing. Every piece of evidence Vesper had carefully gathered was now laid bare under the bright courtroom lights. Cassian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Sable kept glancing at him, her usual calm mask cracking. When Judge Ravencrest finally spoke, her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "After reviewing the new evidence, this court finds that the previous temporary custody order was granted based on materially false and misleading information. The petition for custody is denied. Full legal and physical custody of Kai Hartwell is hereby returned to his mother, Zephyrine Quill." She paused, then added with quiet finality, "Furthermore, Mr. Cassian Hartwell is prohibited from any contact with the minor child for a minimum of 5 years, except under supervised conditions approved by this court. Any violation will result in immediate legal consequences." The gavel came down. It was over. Cassian sat frozen, staring at the judge as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Sable covered her mouth with both hands. For a brief moment, our eyes met across the aisle. In that single look, I saw everything: regret, shame, and the crushing weight of what he had lost. He had lost his sister. He had lost his nephew. He had lost whatever fragile respect remained in our small town. And he had lost the home he tried so desperately to steal. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumph. Only a deep, aching relief mixed with sorrow for the brother I once knew. Later that same week, on a quiet afternoon when soft snow began to fall over Evergreen Ridge, I drove to the address Vesper had given me. Kai was waiting on the front steps. The moment he saw my car, he stood up and started running. His small legs carried him across the snowy yard as fast as they could. I barely had time to open the door before he threw himself into my arms. "Mommy!" he cried, burying his face in my neck. I dropped to my knees right there in the snow, holding him so tightly I was afraid I might break him. Tears streamed down my face as I breathed him in, the familiar scent of his hair, the warmth of his small body against mine. "I missed you so much, baby," I whispered, my voice breaking. Mommy's here. I've got you now. We stayed like that for a long time, snowflakes landing softly on our hair and shoulders, while the world around us felt strangely still and kind. That evening, we walked together through the lavender fields behind Quill Haven. The plants were dormant under the winter frost, but I could already imagine them blooming again in spring. Kai held my hand tightly, swinging it as we walked. "Mommy, can we plant more flowers?" he asked, his voice still carrying a trace of uncertainty. I smiled through fresh tears. "Yes, sweetheart. Tomorrow we'll plant a whole new row, just you and me." The next morning, under a pale winter sun, Kai and I knelt in the soft earth. We dug carefully, side by side, placing young lavender plants into the ground. His small hands were covered in dirt, and every so often he would look up at me with that gap-toothed smile I had missed so desperately. As we worked, something deep inside me began to heal. Not completely, not yet, but enough. Quill Haven slowly came back to life in the weeks that followed. Guests returned, new bookings filled the calendar. Ellis managed the daily operations with quiet pride, and Marigold continued to check on us every few days with warm bread and gentle smiles. I didn't seek revenge in the loud, dramatic way some might expect. My revenge was quieter, stronger. It was rebuilding what Cassian had tried to destroy. It was raising my son with even more love and presence than before. It was refusing to let bitterness poison the beautiful life I had worked so hard to create. Because I learned something profound in the darkest days of this battle. Kindness is never a weakness, but staying silent when family betrays you, that is the real mistake. We must protect our children. We must protect ourselves, and sometimes that means finding the courage to speak truth, even when it shakes the foundations of everything we thought we knew. Years from now, when the lavender blooms again in full purple waves across these fields, I will walk with Kai and tell him the story, not of hatred, but of resilience, of how love, when tested by fire, can grow deeper roots than anyone can tear away. And as the snow continued to fall gently that afternoon, covering the newly planted lavender in a soft white blanket, I held my son close and whispered a promise into his hair. "We're going to be okay, Kai, better than okay." The flowers would sleep through winter, but when spring came, they would rise again, stronger, just like us. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal, disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audio-visual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.